And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, July 22nd. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. I hope everybody had a good weekend. So, we're going to continue our quarterback rankings for each division. Today, I will be going over the AFC North quarterbacks, so that'll get us started. Then we will talk about the Dallas Cowboys in the second part of the show, some recent comments made by Stephen Jones, because, the Cowboys, again, we still got to see how they're going to work out their contract situations with their players, specifically Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. So I'll talk about what he had to say. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about some comments made by John Harbaugh about Lamar Jackson and how he could become the greatest ever. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about Darren Waller and what he had to say about Daniel Jones as Daniel Jones gears up for this 2024 campaign as the Giants starting quarterback for the moment. And then in the final part of the show, we'll give you a little bit of an update on Jordan Love and his contract talks. They seem to be heating up, supposedly. So we'll get into that as well. And like I said, hope everybody had a good weekend. And let's get started here. So let's rank the quarterbacks in the AFC North, shall we? So I honestly, doing it last night, I kind of thought it was difficult, particularly the 3 and 4 spots. So I'll go over it right now. So to start off the list here, we got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and Russell Wilson is now. Russell Wilson's probably going to be the starter to start the year, and he's coming off of a good year, numbers wise. Now, the numbers don't tell the full story, but you look at his stats: 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions, 3,000 yards passing. I mean, compared to the previous season, now he did have 3,500 yards passing, but he did have 16 touchdowns to 11 picks. So the touchdown to interception ratio improved, and the Broncos at one point looked like, hey, maybe this team could squeak into the playoffs. I mean, compared to how they started off, they looked like they were going to finish with one of the worst records in football, but it ended up finishing 8-9 on the season. But right now, he is looked at as the starter at the moment. But you wonder what kind of leash he's going to have, because they could opt to go with Justin Fields. And last year, Justin Fields, 2,500 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. So, I don't know. I mean, there are people that say that Justin Fields deserves to start. There's people that believe Russell Wilson should start. I do lean towards Russell Wilson starting. Now, my thing with the Steelers is there are some issues on the offense, particularly who's going to step up and be that number 2 wide receiver. I know, looking at Van Jefferson's player profile on the Sleeper app for fantasy, I think I saw something that said he looks like he's standing out as that number 2. They drafted Roman Wilson out of Michigan to maybe take on a big role in this offense, and maybe be that number 2 long term, because we kind of know what Van Jefferson is. Because the Steelers went out and they signed guys like, they signed Van Jefferson. They also signed Quez Watkins. They signed guys that, are more for depth purposes. And, of course, you have George Pickens, and we'll see how he is. If they could find stability at the quarterback position, you would think George Pickens is going to have a big year. And they made improvements to the offensive line as well, and that's going to help out the running game. So, in terms of the supporting cast within this division, I think the Steelers do have the worst supporting cast, but I don't think it's a bad supporting cast. So that's one of the reasons why I'd probably put these two guys at 4, and also because they could both see playing time. It's possible. Like, if the Steelers, let's say, are like 2-5 or something, then maybe they think, all right, let's give Justin Fields a chance. That's just me. We'll see what happens. But at least for the moment, Russell Wilson is going to be the starter. So that's where I rank the Steelers quarterbacks. And it's been a couple times now. Well, now a few times. I had the Vikings. I had Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy, and then Jacoby Brissett and Drake May. So yeah, this is another case where it's just you don't really know how the season's going to play out with the Steelers quarterback situation. So then at number 3, and there's pressure on this guy to go out there and play well, and that's Deshaun Watson. And we've talked about him a handful of times this offseason, where he's at with his rehab. Actually, like Russell Wilson, because the Steelers say he looks like, he's the Russell Wilson from Seattle. So we'll see if they're actually telling the truth. But yeah, the Browns, they feel confident with Deshaun Watson. Now, it's a little different because Russell Wilson's not coming off of an injury from the last 2 seasons. Deshaun Watson's been banged up. Season ended early last year, and even before that, really wasn't playing great. Yeah, there's pressure on him to do well. And, the Browns, again, 5 different starting quarterbacks last season, and they still made the playoffs. Got to give them credit, but they're hoping that doesn't happen again, and Deshaun Watson goes out there and plays every game. And even if he misses, a couple games, all right. Because they have Jameis Winston and you got Tyler Huntley as well, Pro Bowl quarterback. So they got depth at the quarterback position, but you don't want to see those guys. You want to see Deshaun Watson play the whole season. So, and I think the Browns supporting cast is better than the Steelers. You got Nick Chubb coming back from injury, and you hope that he bounces back because, he's a great player, but, it's a tough knee injury to come back from. So and the Browns are going to try to ease him back into it. You still got Jerome Ford. They brought in Deontay Foreman, and the offensive line you hope can stay healthy as well. And then you got the pass catchers. They still got to figure out contracts with Amari Cooper, contract situation with him. They brought in Jerry Jeudy. They gave him a contract extension. Elijah Moore, David Njoku. There are weapons on this team. My problem with Deshaun Watson is, he's inaccurate sometimes, the turnovers. And yeah, how is he going to bounce back from this injury? That's what I'm looking at. So I don't know if we're going to get the Deshaun Watson from the Texans days when he was playing really well and making the playoffs. But I'm going to put him at 3 because he is the starter. Like, they're not going to change that. Now, if he plays, like, really, really bad, then maybe they do have to put in somebody else. But I don't think he's going to be like that. I think he's going to be inconsistent. That's really how I put it. He's going to be inconsistent. He's going to make good plays, but then he's also going to make some bad plays, and he's going to turn the ball over. So I'm going to put him at 3, though. So at number 2, again, another guy coming off of an injury, and, I'm a little worried about it, the wrist, but I got to put him at 2 because when he's healthy, he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and that's Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's season got cut short last season because of the wrist, and he was banged up a lot last year. He had the calf injury, and then, of course, the wrist injury, which effectively ended his season, like I just said. But when he's right, like I said, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And this is the toughest division in football. So, for the Bengals, they are going to have to, play really well because, like I said, it's the toughest division in football. And it was interesting because I was kind of, the other night I was kind of eavesdropping on, a conversation that some of my friends were having when I was out. And one of my friends did say that he thinks the Bengals are going to finish last in the division, which I thought was interesting. If Joe Burrow gets hurt, that could very well happen. Because if he gets hurt, the Bengals are not going to do anything this year. This season, all lies on Joe Burrow's health. Because if he's not healthy, the Bengals are not going to go anywhere. And you got T. Higgins coming back. You still got Jamar Chase. The running game's going to be a little bit different without Joe Mixon. You got Zach Moss now. You brought in Mike Gesicki. Jermaine Burton's going to take over, I guess, in that Tyler Boyd role as the number 3 guy. So, there could be some guys that are on their way out after this year. Well, particularly T. Higgins. So, I'm curious to see how they're going to balance the running game in this offense. But, I mean, the Bengals are going to be throwing it a bunch of times. But if Burrow's healthy, I mean, he could be 1. But right now, I'm going to put him at 2. So if he's healthy, I expect him to go out there and have a good year, and I expect the Bengals to be a problem in the AFC once again. And then at number 1, a guy that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show, that's Lamar Jackson. The reigning MVP, now 2-time MVP. I got to put him at 1. The last couple years, dealt with injuries, but you see when Lamar Jackson plays a full season, the Ravens, you see what they could do as a team. They get all the way to the AFC Championship game. So, and I think Joe Burrow is a better passer than Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar has gotten better throwing the football these last few years. And you'd like to see, they're another team. You'd like to see, who's going to step up as that number 2 wide receiver. Because you got Zay Flowers. They paid Rashad Bateman, so I guess they're banking on him being that guy. But who's going to step up and be that number 2 wide receiver? Because you got Mark Andrews and you got Isaiah Likely. They got 2 good tight ends. You got Derrick Henry coming out of the backfield. But like I said, who's going to be that number 2 wide receiver? But yeah, I mean, I expect Lamar Jackson to go out there, play really well, have another good year. And again, another part of his game is running the football. And that's what makes him one of the most electrifying players in the league. And if he stays healthy, the Ravens are going to have a good year. So, yeah, I got him at 1. Now, again, like I said, you could put Burrow at 1. It's tough, but because Lamar Jackson's coming off of his MVP season, and I'm still a little worried about the Burrow wrist injury, I got Lamar Jackson at 1. So to kind of just go through it once again, so you got the Steelers quarterbacks at 4, Deshaun Watson 3, Joe Burrow 2, Lamar Jackson 1. So let me know what you guys think about those rankings. How would you rank them? I thought these were hard because, you could even put like Deshaun Watson last and move the Steelers quarterbacks up. I mean, it's tough, but I think Burrow and Lamar Jackson, it's easy to, they're the top 2. And you could put, you could flip them around, but that's how I have it. So let me know what you guys think about my rankings there. So we're going to take our first break of the show, and then when we come back, we will talk about the Dallas Cowboys. We'll talk about some comments made by Stephen Jones regarding the Cowboys, star players and, some updates on that, what he had to say, because, they got to pay their stars, and we'll see if they pay all their stars. We'll get into that when we come back from our first break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.